in the Akashic, there's a thing called the zone of choice where you choose your parents, you choose your bloodlines for the healing of the planet. Like you come in, it's like, oh, that bloodline has alcohol addiction and abuse, and that bloodline has a lot of anxiety and maybe money issues. And I'm going to go in and not only experience it in my DNA, also I'm going to be in this energy and it gets templated on my energy field. But then when I grow up and it becomes so painful, I embark on this healing journey to heal. And so once you heal yourself, you're freeing the bloodline and the buck stops with you. So basically your kids experience less distortion and then their kids experience less distortion. And that's one way we're healing the planet, is bloodline by bloodline at a time, remembering we're divine sovereign beings, remembering who you truly are from the higher planes. You're not just this body. You're not just this avatar that's playing this character. And so people get really embedded in like, this is what it is and this is who I am. And they get in that victim consciousness. It's like if you can pull up and see the higher perspective and why you're here.
Welcome to the Art of Woo podcast with your host, Lee Erickson. Alrighty, so today we have a very special guest. I have been looking forward to this day for so long. We have Kimber Tiernan, who is a special human in my life. She has been one of the more influential people in my personal life in the last few years since I've met her. She is an Akashic Records reader. She is a teacher. She also has her own podcast called Beyond the Veil, which is incredible and such a good listen, which goes over the twin flame journey and other mystical encounters. You teach courses about how to access the Akashic Records yourself, also about quantum leaping, and you're also a real pro, I feel like, when it comes to the divine masculine and feminine energies, which I've learned so much about just through you. So there's so much I am looking forward to talking about with Kimber today. And yeah, if you want to give kind of a little introduction of yourself and kind of how you have arrived to where you are today, that would be amazing.
Amazing. Thank you. And yeah, you encompass so much of it. So I love that. I'm based in Los Angeles, but I do spiritual courses and healing sessions, Akashic Record sessions. I came upon this journey pretty early in my life. I was pretty sick as a kid, and so I got fevers and was kind of in bed a lot. And the first time I remember actually seeing Beyond the Veil is I was really sick and laying in bed, and I had a fever. It was like 3 a.m. And this angel, well, it was like this big black woman. That's the way she showed up. And she sat at the end of my bed and she was like, "It's okay, honey." She's putting blankets on me, giving me water. And I was like, this is so weird. Like, who is this? But she had the most loving maternal energy I could ever imagine. And then she looked at me and she goes, "Tonight we're going to learn how to fly." And she took me basically out of my body. And I went up in my room and I could see the pictures on my walls. I could see my dolls that were on the shelves. And then we went up through the ceiling into the night sky, into like the ethers. And I went flying through this river of light. And then I landed in a room with a boy. And I looked at him and I said, "Oh, tonight we're going to learn how to fly." And I pulled him out. And then we went flying in the ethers. And we continued to do this as we evolved as a children. And so he was my imaginary friend. And it was really beautiful and really amazing. And I used to pray. I prayed a lot. I was a very Catholic little girl, and I was always into prayer and mysticism and angels and Mother Mary and Jesus. And so I would see these visions, even at church. Like I would see the angels, or I'd see Mother Mary basically come to life. And what happened was, teenagers, most of us go to sleep for
Totally.
It's like, oh, I'm going to go party and I'm going to do my thing. And then when I was, this is like an interesting part of the story that's coming up, but when I was 19, I was dating this guy and I realized I could have telepathy with him. He was kind of a stoner. He was like a hockey player and he would forget about me, which is horrible. He'd be like, oh, want a date? And then he would not show up. And I was like, what the hell? Because he would be like with his hockey friends getting stoned. But I realized if I just closed my eyes and meditate, I could connect telepathically with him and say, call me. And almost every time he would call me, which opened up my telepathic abilities, understanding that, oh, when we really connect to someone and intentionally they can hear us, and he would hear me every time.
Yeah.
And then I decided to go, I was going to college. I was going to be like a humanities major and an English major, and was so excited. And then I about faced, like right before I was about to go to college, I just got a download. You need to go in the music industry. And it's so wild. And so I was like, okay. And so I went in and I ended up manifesting a job with a major label, which was wild. And so I even think back now of the time, like, I mean, this is like 1989. And I was manifesting every day that this is what I wanted to do. And everyone's like, you got to move to LA. You got to do this, that, or the other. I'm like, no, I'm going to do this in Salt Lake. And so I manifested it. And basically the universe created a job for me there. I was the first ever rep in Salt Lake City. And
so awesome.
It's so awesome. And people are like, what the heck? And so, and then one of the first bands I worked, I went to the concert and we went dancing afterwards. And then later that night, we were in the alley and he kissed me. And that's when I saw like our childhood and flying through light and past lives and all this stuff happened. And I was like, oh my God, it's you. And he was like, oh my God, it's you. And we were like, holy cow, I thought you were my imaginary friend and you were real. No. And so that just blew me open going, holy crap, like this stuff is real. And then I ran because, that's what you do when you're scared and wounded, and went and got married. I had a couple kids, but when my daughter was born, I started having dreams and visions of him. And he put out an album. I'm like, why do I think these songs are about me? That makes no sense. And then I got the call because I started hearing his voice in my head. The telepathy started opening up again. And he would be like, I would like dancing to his music. And he would go, I love when you dance to my music. And I was like, what? And I'm like, I miss you. And I could hear his voice. I miss you too. And I was like, this is just crazy. So I went to see him to see what was going on because I was like, this is so bizarre and so out of this world. Like the dreams, angels would come to me and say, you guys are on a spiritual path together. You're here to save the world with your love. And it was so distinct and the angels were so tangible and real. And so I'm like, okay, this is some spiritual mission I need to go on. I went and saw him, and the moment he took my hand, it was like I stepped into heaven. And the whole world opened up. It was like going from 3D to 5D. It was like all of a sudden, everything was right in the world. It was this golden light, and light shot out of the tops of our head and connected to our higher self and activated our Kundalini. I went home and I basically lost everything with that because my ex-husband was very intuitive. He was a Pisces, and he's like, do you love him? And I was like, I sat there because I can't lie. And he was like, your pause says it all. And so it was really sad. And I had 2 little kids, the destruction. But through that, I went through that dark night of the soul. I went into like deep despair and deep wounding. My childhood trauma downloaded like a movie. His childhood trauma downloaded like a movie. And I was like, oh, we're here to heal our traumas and come into like deep self-love for ourselves. And we ended up in an interesting relationship, but with that, it just was unearthing all the dark night and all the traumas for her. So that's what led me to like, that's why I love shadow work and I love the inner child work, because that was all I could do at the time was, okay, this is a mess. I'm a mess. I want to die. He wants to die. We were both very suicidal at the time because it was just so much devastation. But through that experience, I just kept reaching for the light and reaching for God and reaching for consciousness and understanding. And through that, the veil was so thin back then for me. And then fast forward so much faster, I wasn't in the music business because I'd quit for my kids. And I was a photographer. I was a student. I was bartending. I was doing all these different things. And I had a call with this guy that was a twin flame coach, leader, YouTuber. And he's telling me, I'm telling him what's going on. And then I was like, yeah, I know all that. Because my angels had told me, I was like, I know all that. My real question is, I'm bartending and I know that's not what I'm here to do.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, well, you're a healer, right? And I was like, yes.
Oh.
And he's like, why aren't you doing it? And I was like, because I don't want to be the weird lady in the purple dress.
Yeah.
And it's the moment I said it out loud, I was like, what? Why would I have a crystal ball and a purple dress?
Yeah. At the time, though, it's like, the labels that we just, as a society are so quick to put on what we don't know,
Mm-hmm.
But
well, there weren't it wasn't like it is now. There wasn't social media.
Totally,
there wasn't even Google. It was so organic, and the ones that you'd see were the psychic signs on the side of the road.
Mm-hmm.
And so I equated that's what I'm going to be.
Yeah. You had to pave your own new way.
And then I was like, oh, I can be me and still do this. Mm-hmm. And so I am authentically me and I do this. But he trained certain people to do his modality and I started training under him. Immediately I said yes. Immediately I was like, I don't care what it costs. I'm in. I started doing yoga teacher training at the same time, which opened up so much more energies for me. And actually, I never actually practiced his modality because in that time, the Pleiades taught me what my modality was. So that's kind of how it started, but it was quite the journey to get there.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting when you were saying, having to kind of go through like the dark night of the soul. Like I couldn't help but think of that's kind of, well, obviously it's like, what are we here for? Right. I mean, life isn't just all puppies and rainbows, unfortunately, but it kind of like that now feels like what is happening collectively, like more than ever. I mean, obviously, I'm only in my 30s, so it's like easy for me to be like, this is really hard now. And obviously there's been challenging times and all throughout history, but it feels like you needed to kind of go through your personal journey to be able to arrive to where you are now to really help like my generation and just, whoever's kind of on the planet right now really be kind of guided through this collective dark night of the soul. It's just kind of what it feels like. I don't know.
100%. And you're not wrong. I think it is. It's the last, 6-7 years has been so incredibly challenging collectively. It is a collective dark night of the soul. It is going from third density to fourth. It's that we're in a birthing canal. We're in a a tunnel to go from one realm to the next. But in that tunnel, all the darkness has to come to the light. All the shadows have to come out for us to heal and clear, just personally and then collectively. So I do see that. I always laugh because I'm like, back when I went through this, it was like there was no information. I went in the forest with a sickle and I was like totally whacking the weeds. Yeah. And now the kids behind me, they just skip through.
Like, damn it. All you have to do is just open Instagram and you're like awakening now. Maybe not. That was like, not quite.
But there's so much information and
so much.
And the consciousness of the planet is so much higher where you can speak about this and you're not weird. Well, some people might think so, but
yeah, right.
There's a whole collective energy that's just so open and hungry for this information.
Totally. There's such a massive shift. And like, obviously being an astrologer, it is 2025 is like, I don't think we're ever going to go through a change like this, in many, 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 many lifetimes. Like this is specifically this year is an extremely, potent transformational year with all of the outer planets shifting too. So in addition to just kind of, like what we're already going through, it's like, that's just another huge layer. But
it is, it's crazy.
Yeah. So on your journey, I guess another thing I was kind of wondering is like, how did you get more specifically into the Akashic Records? And like, how did they find you or did you find them? Like, how do you?
Yeah, it
Gotcha.
was so random. I was doing healing work. I was having people come for sessions. And while I was talking, I would sit with people first before they laid on my table and just kind of talk, and more like a holistic psychology type of thing, because I did have so much information. And then every once in a while I'd say, well, they're saying this and that. And people would be like, who are they? And
Who's
I'm like,
that?
I don't know, your guides. They're like standing behind me, talking to me, telling me things to tell you. And I didn't have the word for it. I was just like, I don't know, your guides. And then one day I was just hanging out, and a friend of mine called me and she's like, I'm having an Akashic Record class at my house. My teacher's going to teach it, but we don't have enough people. And so we need more people. Do you want to take the class? And I happened to be off both those days. It was like 2 days in a row. And I was like, sure, why not? It was like,
Yeah.
I think at the time it was like $250. I was like, sure, I'm in.
Yeah.
And I went. And as soon as we started opening them, it just opened for me. It was like the
Amazing.
guides were waiting. They
Yeah.
had so much information. It was an instant connection for me. It wasn't something I had to really try. It was difficult because trusting yourself
Mm-hmm.
when you get in there is one
Mm-hmm.
of the biggest challenges. But it was like we'd had that divine appointment for a long time. And after that, I never looked back. I started practicing. I did my 30 days of just, giving free
Reading.
sessions to
Yeah.
people. And I just got more and more like connected to it the more I practiced.
Mm-hmm.
And because at first it's a little halting. I mean, you've trained, and it's like it's a little halting. You're like, am I
Mm-hmm.
getting this right? And you're so afraid you're going to say the wrong thing or tell them the wrong thing.
Totally.
But the more I opened them, the more information came through. And even now, there's this channel that just comes so easily now because of it.
Totally.
Yeah, it was the
Yeah.
best $250 I ever spent.
Yeah. Right. Great,
Yeah,
great return on investment there.
totally. And I subsequently did a bunch of different trainings after, but
Okay.
it was
Yeah.
fun. I went and did one with Linda Howe, who wrote the book, How to Read the Akashic Records.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but it's been such a great modality for me, for sure.
Totally. There's, yeah. And just for anyone listening, I actually recently finished the level 2 course. Yeah. You have like the intro to Akashic and then like the more advanced. And I just took both this past year, and it's been such an incredible journey. I still am like slowly building up the courage to kind of even announce it. This is actually like the first time I've even kind of talked about it really on the podcast. But I would love to get more into readings, but I'm like still just like trying to get past that. Like, is this all in my head, or is this the actual advice? But I have had like a handful of really cool moments when we were one of the first course, when we were doing the practice exchange with the other students. I forgot who it was, what her name was, but she was great. And it was like one of my first readings. And I remember she was debating quitting her job, and she's kind of like, I'm not sure if this is the right time or what the next step would be, da da da. And I was like, this is so weird, but I'm seeing one of those tall, like soldier hats, like the big fuzzy black ones from like the UK, I think it is. And she's like, one of my best friend lives in England, and I've been debating visiting her or something like that. And I was like, that's so cool. So you'll have like little moments like that are so just because I'd never met this girl in my life before. I had no idea about her, which does kind of make it easier because you don't have any like attachments going into it. But yeah, little moments like that like give you so much, hope and inspiration to keep going. So anyways, I need to keep practicing, but it's been really cool. I actually have my records open right now as we speak too.
I love that. So good.
Because yeah, and another amazing piece of advice that you gave me is like, start opening them up while you're doing artwork and kind of experiment with that and see what happens. And yeah, and I have quite a bit, and it's been really an interesting experience to kind of see, like, I don't know, the intuition really guide me more than just like being so mechanical or kind of masculine going into it. So
totally,
it's been really cool. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
So good. Do you want to explain what the Akashic Records are for those people who don't know?
Amazing. Yes.
Amazing.
Minor detail. Yeah.
Totally.
Thank you.
You're like, what are you guys talking
about? Right? Like what? We just went full on. Yeah, let's do that. What in your interpretation, like what,
Okay.
how would you describe them?
So basically the Akashic Records, it's a field of information. It lives inside our bodies, inside our DNA, all around us in the ethers. It's like the quantum field that contains everything that has happened, is happening, and possibly could happen. So they're possible and probable timelines based on your frequency, your trajectory now, just knowing that we have free will and we can always change our timeline. We can speed time up, we can slow time down, and in every moment we're creating our reality. And so there's no set. They're really good at the potentials, but just know we can change. And you can look at it like a very layman's term is like Google for your soul. It's like it contains all the information that's ever happened to you as a soul. So it's the galactic timelines, it's earthly timelines, it's your childhood, it's who you are as a divine being. And so when we open the records, it's this interfacing relational field. And so you give information too, where it's like meeting someone for coffee for the first time. The guides want to know your human perspective. They want to know who this person is to you, how you feel about a situation. Then they can give you the higher level perspective and help you sort out what is going on in your life. It's just the reason I love them. It's one, they're so compassionate. It's a very compassionate and loving field. It's never gloom and doom. It's always hope and love and seeing things from the perspective of your higher self or your guides or God. And also what I love about it is the clarity. It's all about healing and focusing on how you become the best version of yourself. I tend to see exalted timelines. I see people's higher self. Like I have a really hard time not falling in love with every person I open the records for. Oh, man. Because it's just the way I can see them, the way their guides see them. And so it's so loving and so nurturing. If that makes sense.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And another question I was going to ask you too is like you said, it's all about like healing. And that's what's so kind of fascinating to me as well, because it's like you said, like it's tapping into like all your other lifetimes, you know, past lives here on Earth or elsewhere. But one thing that was also really amazing learning from your course too was like how to really kind of heal like a trauma that may have happened from even a past lifetime. Can you kind of explain a little bit more how that works? Or
yeah, and that came through for me in the records. That was something I was never taught. It just, the more I did it, the more the guides pushed me into helping people heal. And one of the things is what I coined it a long time ago and never changed the words. So it's called the first and the worst process. And it's finding within the first and the worst time something happened to you. So it's very based on Carl Jung's work because I'm a huge fan. Also, it's based on this technique called the effect bridge technique in hypnotherapy. And so it's kind of marrying those two, but it came through in the records of, so say when you're triggered, a trigger is always an indication of a past trauma. If you're having an emotional reaction that's way bigger than what the event actually calls for, you know there's something in your past that's making that trigger come to the surface. So what we do is we find the first and the worst time you experienced that emotion and go back and do inner child work and heal that moment in time and then bring that inner child back into your heart for the huge transformation. It's so helpful and I love teaching it to people, doing it with people. And I think that's a great way of healing is to find those moments of why am I triggered? Oh, there's this wounded little inner child that something happened. And what always surprises me about that technique is it's never the moment you think. It's never the big moments like, well, of course I have that trauma because of this. It's those little things that happen that you might not even remember that has really affected that subconscious mind. And so you're running through that subconscious mind and attracting more of that until you go and bring that shadow to the light and heal it. And then another thing that I loved that came through was clearing the Akashic Records of when there's something. So say you do all the inner child work and you do the trigger work and you do all that stuff, and there's certain things that just won't heal. And the guides were like, well, why don't you just clear it in the records? And I was why like, not? Why not?
All right, sure. Yeah, no
And
big
what
deal.
they showed me, like, it was kind of like this field, and in the corner of the records was this template of maybe money issues or divine feminine issues or whatnot. And so immediately it was just like calling Archangel Michael and Ganesha, and they worked in tandem together to clear that part of the records, maybe the point of origin, or where it holds those timelines of a particular issue. And we just cleared it. And then they had me go into people's energy bodies and clear that, because in our energy bodies we have what's called samskaras, which are patterns of energy that we hold. We take these energy bodies lifetime to lifetime and clear that. And then they had me do neural pathways, clearing the neural pathways, and then going in people's heart and clearing the DNA. And it just became this whole thing. And it's pretty profound, and it's pretty amazing and intense as well. And that just came from them, and it was amazing. So I just became the conduit for that.
Yeah. And again, just by kind of taking your courses and everything, like you have some really incredible stories like that. And,
Yeah.
again, like you being in the LA area, you work with some, and obviously we're not going to name names or anything, but you worked with some really like pretty notable people and have done some pretty impressive, like powerful things to help them too, which is, just so
It's
cool
fun.
to me.
It's
So
really fun.
when you are, and I know again, you have taught this, and forgive me for kind of like forgetting it, but like when you are kind of going in and you are like clearing, like say, for example, like you said, the neural pathways and everything, are you more like visualizing? Do you feel like you're more clairvoyant than the other clairs? Like, are you like kind of visualizing things the most?
Yeah, I am very clairvoyant. I see
Okay.
things. And yeah, I think I have all the clairs, but I think my dominant one is probably, well, I think claircognizance, which is the clear knowing. When I know something, I know it. And that's if I ever argue with somebody, you're probably 100% knowing I'm right, because I don't argue unless I know I'm right. And it's that does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm very open to being wrong. I love being wrong, because I love learning, and I love exploring, and people pushing back and me seeing from things from a different perspective. But if I argue, it's most likely I'm right, because it's that deep knowing that it's true. And then I think the clairvoyance is the next one. I do hear things every once in a while, but it's not all the time. And it depends on the client too. Artists, I'm more clairvoyant with artists, because they see in pictures, they see in visuals. And so when I'm explaining something visually, they're like, oh, that makes so much sense to me. But someone that's, maybe not so clairvoyant, it might be the deep knowing, or even just deep feeling, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Like in some of the sessions I've had with you, you definitely have been like, I feel that in my body,
Yeah. My body's very in tune, and I can feel, distortions or dis-ease in people's bodies, or the anxiety, that whatnot. What's been really surprising to me is sometimes before sessions, like say I'll get a lot of anxiety, and for no reason, it comes out of nowhere. And I'm like, what is, now I recognize, oh, my next session, that person has a lot of anxiety. My body starts to feel their dominant energy, so that I can get in center and help them through it. So I understand what they're feeling, if that makes sense.
Yeah, man, it's like I think about you sometimes at like the days when you have, 5 back-to-back sessions or whatever, really busy days, and just like how kind of exhausting that can be in like not only your mental but physical and like emotional. Like it's a lot. It's like,
it's a lot.
Being a therapist is like one thing, kind of sitting there listening to people's problems or, issues and whatever, but it's like to embody their, taking on their energy and all of the downloads and everything. It's a lot. So
yeah, it's a lot. And to spend a lot of time in a different dimension is challenging. If that makes sense. I have to ground a lot, because I spend half my time in different dimensions. Like time is weird for me. Like I missed our time of what we're supposed to do, because time does not make sense to me. And so it's just, I have a hard time nailing time, if that makes sense.
Trust me, again, I am like the most forgiving person, because I myself, I don't necessarily have the same excuse as you. I like to just blame it on being like a Sagittarius, and that I like really don't pay attention to details. I say that all the time. My husband, being a Gemini, is like very detail oriented, and it's like a really conflict.
Wow.
because like honestly, like I am late a lot. I think it's like
Funny.
just being immersed in the present moment.
Mm.
I don't know if yeah, it's
Yeah,
tough being
that makes sense because I was just thinking like Bella, is very detail oriented and sometimes it's hard. And she's a Gemini, so that makes
she's Gemini.
so much sense. I never
Yeah,
equated those together. So funny.
we're like literally, opposites of on the zodiac too. Like we're exactly like 6 months apart, almost to the day, my husband and I. So we are like always coming from this like opposite contrast. And they say opposites attract, and obviously we do, but it's like, yeah, there's definitely a lot of like push and pull with that type of energy.
Definitely.
But yeah, it must be hard going from like one dimension to another and then like back to this like 3-dimensional, like,
it's like,
trust me, I'm exhausted of this 3-dimensional dimension. Three-dimensional
yeah, we're all exhausted.
Oh my God. Can we just and it's funny because this would be a perfect segue into kind of talking about timelines and ascension. But before we do get into that, I did kind of want to also just brush upon like guides, because you did mention, everybody has different guides and like certain people will kind of show up for different reasons. You mentioned Archangel Michael and then Ganesha. And it's like that to me, I feel like is one of the coolest parts about the Akashic, because it's obviously it's not just like one, strict kind of religion. Obviously it's not a religion, but it's like it's literally a mixed bag of like everything and all. And I'm sure you can explain that way more eloquently than me, but can you kind of just go over like all the cultures and
I work very archetypally. I'm very I have 6 planets in the 12th house. It's very the collective unconscious. And so I do work archetypally. I see in there, I can always tell someone that grew up as a Catholic. I've never been wrong, not once in my life, because it's Jesus, it's Archangel Michael, it's Mother Mary, and usually Mary Magdalene. They all show up in a really strong, potent way. And I'll be like, oh, you grew up Catholic. And they're like, how'd you know? I'm like, all the Catholic archetypes are here. They're all these beautiful beings, but it's all the ascended masters. It's our, the gods, the goddesses from all these different cultures. I'm also very connected to the Hindu culture. And so like Ganesha or Lakshmi or Krishna, Radha, Sita and Ram, Shiva shows up for divine masculine. And so I've also learned to find patterns. If Shiva shows up, usually in a male's Akashic records, I know they're on the divine masculine path of opening up the heart, but also being strong and that sacred rebel, and on that ascension path as a divine masculine energy. The way I see it is like you don't need to believe in these archetypes for it to work, because on the highest of the high, we're all one, and these energies hold the blueprint of that particular frequency within your body. So say it's Mary Magdalene shows up. Oh, what I know and what she's working with you is that rising divine feminine. She's working with the feminine that's been erased from history, that wants to come up and be seen and, embrace her sensuality, embrace that high priestess energy, embrace the divine union. And so it tells me so much just knowing who's in people's records. As soon as I see whatever, I'm like, I know this about this person because this guide is showing up. And for me, galactics will show up, like the Pleiadians will show up, the Arcturians, the Sirians, the Andromedans, sometimes, not all the time. But it tells me so much about the journey of that soul. And these guides are so loving, and they have such a great perspective. They kind of talk as a collective up here unless they have a specific message. And that's if you want to know what surprises me about the Akashic Records is sometimes one particular guide will step through with a very distinct message, and like Mary Magdalene will come in my body and give a message that's so potent that there's no way it came from me. There's no way. It's a completely different frequency. It's a completely different energy. One time Yeshua came in, well, a couple times, but the one time I'm remembering, it's with Allie, who takes a lot of courses, and it was a twin flame thing, and he just all of a sudden this energy, it was the most loving energy I've ever felt. It was so large and so golden and so beautiful, and came over and had a message for both of us and just started talking in this like the highest of the high. We both just had tears
Oh my
flowing
gosh.
down our faces, and it was incredible and crazy. And I don't like, I'm not a channel where I specifically like, I'm just going to channel this person. I kind of let them, like, I have a message and I want to come through. And I think that's what's been so beautiful. But everyone
Yeah.
has guides. I see everyone has archetypes. But a lot of people, when they're like, well, who are my guides? Sometimes it's like, oh, you've got 2 guides that have been with you since the beginning of time, or 3 guides. Occasionally it'll get names. I'm not really great at names, but sometimes the names will come through of who these beings are for them.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you ask about, like, you know, do I have any ancestors? And I'm like, oh, there's a grandmother and she looks like this and she's like this. And they're like, oh, that's my grandma. And they'll have messages, and it's great.
So awesome. My very first session with you was just incredible. And I was talking to you about how, because I'm an artist, and I was actually, at the time, I had just finished this course that I was taking about like surface pattern design, which is, kind of like the textile, excuse me, creating like graphics for, clothing or like any type of kind of printed accessory. But I had a lot of guilt about it, kind of pursuing that as a career, because I thought that I was ultimately just kind of adding to like the pollution of the planet. And like a lot of, the fashion industry is like one of the most biggest pollutants of the planet. And I was like very kind of, held back by that. And Gaia, Mother Earth, you channeled her like no other. She came through, and it was just like the most profound thing. And you just went on and on and on about how, like, there's so many reasons to be, worried about things like that, but ultimately you need to follow your heart. And also just kind of sitting here worrying and kind of complaining about it, like, what good is that going to do? It's one thing to like talk about it, but like, it was the takeaway message was just amazing. So
I don't even remember that.
Coolest.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I know, because you do this like every day. So it's like, how are you going to, I can only imagine. But it was the coolest thing. And I've always felt, I grew up in like rural little farmland, Vermont, organic country, basically. And so I've always been like, felt so connected to the earth. And I know that we all are. But, as soon as I moved out like west into the more bigger cities, I was just seeing like trash on the streets. Like I would be, taken down. Like it was like a gut punch or something. Oh my God. Like, I can't believe we treat the planet like this, So I've always felt like very deeply connected to just nature. And so you channeling her was like the coolest, reassuring moment for me.
That was amazing. And,
it was really cool.
Everyone's connected to Earth because we're all part of her, but some people are more connected to Gaia. And like lately what's been coming is Earth seeds. Like we talk about star seeds. And recently a friend of mine was pregnant and they're like, oh, she's an Earth seed. She came here to seed the Earth and be from the Earth. And what's really powerful is the girl has almost all of her. What is she? She's a
Earth sign,
a Capricorn with a Virgo moon with
and like Taurus
rising or something. It's like, she goes, you said she was an Earth seed, and she is. I was like,
oh my God, that is amazing.
It was really cool.
That is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, there's so many things I could like talk to you about. I guess kind of while we're on the records too, and kind of just talking about like life, like as the collective and the earth and kind of where we are right now, where we're headed. There's so much to go from there. But how do you feel like the Akashic can kind of really help us heal? Like, how do you see that kind of happening right now? Like, and you kind of playing an active role in that?
I think the higher perspective of why we're here. And I think what the Akashic brings through is, what they talk a lot, which really aligns with what Dolores Cannon said was, in the 1940s, Earth put out a call and she was like, basically, Mayday, Mayday, they're going to blow me up with the atomic bomb. I need help. And beings from all across the cosmos, maybe we had finished our third density incarnations and maybe we'd gone to the higher dimensions. And we heard this call and we're like, I love Earth. I've done so much growth there. She's a living library of light. She's a school. She's really important in the cosmos. And so it's like, we volunteered. We're like, I'll go, spiraled our consciousness down. And I think when people understand that, when the Akashic explains their soul journey of why they're here right now, and what in the Akashic, there's a thing called the zone of choice, where you choose your parents. You choose your bloodlines for the healing of the planet. Like you come in, it's like, oh, that bloodline has alcohol addiction and abuse, and that bloodline has a lot of anxiety and maybe money issues. And I'm going to go in and not only experience it in my DNA, also I'm going to be in this energy and it gets templated on my energy field. But then when I grow up and it becomes so painful, I embark on this healing journey to heal. And so once you heal yourself, you're freeing the bloodline and the buck stops with you. So basically your kids experience less distortion and then their kids experience less distortion. And that's one way we're healing the planet, is bloodline by bloodline at a time, remembering we're divine sovereign beings, remembering who you truly are from the higher planes. You're not just this body. You're not just this avatar that's playing this character. And so people get really embedded in like, this is what it is and this is who I am. And they get in that victim consciousness. It's like, if you can pull up and see the higher perspective and why you're here.
Just like the one of, we chose our parents is like so profound in itself. Like how many, if everybody really kind of could focus on that, like how freeing is that, actually this was my choice. And yeah, we chose to incarnate at this moment in time, which again, like I was saying earlier, is just like such a profound time to be on this planet.
Yeah. Well, and I think another thing is the compassion that's in there. So say you have a really deep problem with your dad. Say your dad abandoned you. And what the Akashic shows is like, if they could have done better, they would have. And so it kind of relieves some of that judgment on that person, because everyone's trying to find relief and everyone's doing the best they can with what the tools they have. And then you see like, God, my mom was 22 when she did that. No wonder. And it relieves some of that stress. But I also, I was doing breath work once, and it was kind of like a few years ago when it was really intense. And I was like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And my higher self came in and she goes, there's nowhere else in the entire cosmos you'd rather be. This is where the action is. Souls are clamoring to get down here right now because this is like 8 lifetimes in one. It's the growth and the evolution of your soul that you're not going to want to miss. And it's like, we have front row seats to the most interesting movie in the entire cosmos.
Absolutely. It literally feels like we're in a movie like more and more every day too.
Yeah,
like
completely. And I think that's where we see the Matrix falling away, because it's starting to feel like a movie. And you're like, I think it's waking people up. Oh, this is a movie. This is what the Hindus call divine Leela, which is a cosmic play. This is God consciousness playing all these different roles for growth, expansion, and learning. And as that matrix falls away, we really start to wake up like, oh, this is a movie. Like, these are characters playing roles.
Yeah. Or like a video game almost, Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's like when I'm having my hard days, I kind of just am like, okay, it's just a video game, It's like I choose like if I go left or am I going right? Like, it's just take a step back. It's not, this getting out of the victim consciousness again, like you said, is like such a huge, it's like ripping off those kind of layers of this like human weight that we carry all the time.
Totally. And what the guides tell me too is like, well, we know with the map of consciousness that shame, blame, guilt are the lowest frequency emotions, and to move your way up. But they say, to be a victim or someone in that energy is really easily controlled. And so the system wants you in a victim state. The system wants you to be dependent on that energy because they can control you. And someone in fear is very easily controlled. And so it's stepping out of that fear.
1,000%. That that was my biggest wake up call, you could say, being in the situation facing fear. And, kind of the last couple of years with the pandemic and all of that, like fear was just like the baseline kind of constant emotion that was running through all of us at that time. And so, being able to, again, just kind of take a step back and reassess and realize how much fear equals control. So so since we kind of mentioned the Matrix, which is like such a interesting topic, I would love to kind of touch on like your thoughts on Ascension. Anyone who's in the kind of spiritual world is, has probably heard this term. And again, this is something that for me has kind of changed my life and given me, I wish I had like a better word, but like really just like hope for humanity. And again, like kind of stepping outside of the matrix and like really just realizing again how powerful us humans are and where I feel like we're ultimately heading. But yeah, I would love to kind of just, if you want to just kind of explain your take on Ascension, because this is such an interesting topic to me too.
Yeah, and I think it's evolution because consciousness is always reaching back for the light. And so the way it is, like, Earth, it's a third density. It has been in the past a third density planet, which is very polarized. It's right, left, right, wrong, good, bad.
Totally.
It's very polarized, and it's a frequency. And so as humans evolve, reach for the light, Earth is also her own system, her own consciousness, and she's evolving and growing into higher dimensional frequencies. So she's going from third density to fourth density, which is the amount of light that can be held in a frequency bandwidth. But through that process, it is the healing. It's the dark night of the soul. It's pulling up the darkness, going into the next dimension. And, I love the work of the Law of One, the raw Law of One. And it's like in third density, there's a choice point. You can either take service to self or service to others. And so every soul, every consciousness, every planet has that choice, whether they make that shift to where they're going to go. And so with the Ascension, it's moving from, a lower dimensional frequency to the high. And we're doing it individually as well, which is remembering who we are as God consciousness and going from more of a carbon base to more of a crystalline, a light body, coming into more a higher perspective. And I also see the Ascension as also the descension of your higher self into the physical body. In the past, we were very separate. It was like my higher self somewhere out there, and I'm very asleep with the veil. When you spiral and you come in, the mind's the veil, and you put on the veil of forgetting. You forget who you are, where you're from, what you're doing. But as we grow in consciousness, our higher self comes and we wake up our soul within our body and we remember from that perspective, which then helps other people remember who they are. And so I think that's what the Ascension is. And that's why we're going through such huge shifts on this planet, because the consciousness is changing. But the matrix is the system that ran that old paradigm. And the system wants to keep people in that system controlled. And so it tries to pull people down with programming, with media, with fear, with all the stuff to keep them, because, that energy feeds off of the fear. They feed off the distortions. They feed off the separation. That's why I'm so about divine neutrality and not playing into those polarity politics and the polarity games. Absolutely. Because I'm not against my neighbor. It's like the matrix wants to keep you in that separation because that's where they get their energy. And so to pull out of that and see it from my perspective, that's the Ascension. That's pulling out of the matrix and seeing everyone as divine and finding forgiveness where people are, if that makes sense.
100%. And, for anyone who has listened to my previous podcast episodes, I focus a lot on astrology. And again, like Pluto has just moved into the sign of Aquarius, which has been in the sign of Capricorn for the last 20 something years, which Capricorn, no offense to any Capricorns, we all have our place in the world, but if I were to describe like a sign that would kind of almost not describe the matrix, but so it's a sign that loves systems and institutions and organization, and it's like a very societal like regimen like way of living. And so Pluto, the sign of death and rebirth and transformation, now moving into Aquarius, where it will be for another 20 years now. Aquarius is all about community and coming together, but it also simultaneously celebrates like individuality. So it's like this perfect kind of balance of like, you can totally live your life how you would love, how you want to. You can be your person. You can bring your gifts to the world. Also, we are here to fully express who we are as divine beings, and not meant to kind of just work this 9-to-5 job slave system all the time. And simultaneously, find community, find how we can really come together to raise our frequency as a collective. And so it's like again, the timing of all of this is just, while so many people are unfortunately so distracted by the media and the headlines. And again, it's like, not to say that obviously like there's a lot of wild shit happening right now, but it's so important for us to remember to not get sucked into what you said, like the lower vibration and the lower frequencies, because that's exactly what's going to keep us kind of trapped down there. So yeah. So again, this timing, and then again, with all of the outer planets shifting this year, it's just like, I keep saying it, it kind of almost feels like this grand finale, although I don't think it's like things are going to be over this year, but it's like, it's going to be a lot. Like just kind of looking at an astrological lens this year, especially, you know, it's a lot condensed into, it's like going to be like 10 years in one, it feels like.
100%.
Yeah. And so it's like, just like you said as well, we have this choice point, you know, like we are truly able to decide like what we're going to do with these energies. Are we going to use them to kind of just stay in captivity and play the victim card, or are we going to rise above that and, you know, go through the dark night of the soul and go through, you know, healing all of our darkness and our traumas, both individually and as a collective, to really rise above that. That's just what it feels like.
Absolutely.
Right
and I see, you know, Aquarius is the sacred rebel. Like whenever I pull in the sacred rebel, they usually have Aquarian placements, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so even Aquarius in Pluto, which is the outer, it's like the sacred rebel coming online with that love and that compassion as well. And just when we talk about the matrix too, it's becoming the sacred rebel where you're so in tune with your inner guidance and the divine. If you're repeating talking points that are just like being fed to you, and you're in the matrix, you're regurgitating what's been fed to you. And so that's also when I know someone's like controlled or in the matrix, they regurgitate the talking points that's on this side or the other, like the news or whatnot. And you're like, just pull out and discern and find your connection to the divine.
Totally. Yeah. And like, again, we're so much more powerful than we were taught, you know, like even just, you kind of mentioned like the telepathy. I always butcher that word, telepathy tapes podcast on, you know, your Instagram. And that's just another sign, I think, in kind of this, like where we are at in humanity and our consciousness, like the fact that like there's a podcast about that's really kind of bringing the ethereal, you know, psychic realm to this really 3D kind of platform, like a podcast like this. Just because the way that podcast is done, I feel like I'm kind of listening to like NPR.
Oh, which is completely me too.
It's like, it's kind of funny. It's like this like version of, you know, where they're trying to like analyze and like, you know, do all these lab tests and everything to like really prove that it's true. And it's like, you know, if we could all, and this is kind of where, you know, we didn't really get a chance to talk about like the divine feminine masculine too much. And I know you have so much to say about that, but I do feel like that feminine energy is so much about like obviously like intuition and wisdom and trust and not necessarily needing to have to like prove it, like bring it down into this like mechanical form to prove that it's accurate. But that's kind of what that podcast is about, of like taking this, you know, psychic realm and putting it into a box and saying, okay, this is actually real. So my point is, we're kind of slowly getting there. Like that's like a very popular podcast and we're moving in that direction, which is really exciting.
The reason I love that is a lot of people have really strong left brains and really strong analytical brains or skeptic brains. And to have that scientific backing just opens up to more people. Because a lot of us, like, I'm a believer. I'm very into the intuition and I trust my intuition, but other people need that. And I love the skeptics. I think my teachings get stronger and better when I have skeptics, because then you bring in the science and you bring in that very third dimensional left brain masculine way of looking at things and then merging it with the feminine, which
absolutely,
you know, and we all have those gifts. And that's what I loved about the telepathy tapes too. It's like opening up, like, this is what's possible for humans, is to be telepathic, connect in other realms and connect other fields. And we've just forgotten in this realm, that we do have telepathy, we do have psychic abilities, we can remote view and teleportation and telekinesis. All of these things are possible. And I think that's what's so beautiful, is we're waking up to that possibility again.
Yeah. And our souls definitely chose this time right now to be here to witness that. I'm pretty
100%, because it's pretty cool.
It's so cool. Yeah. Because I'm just thinking about it too. It's like, if we really do become to that level where we, it's like, you can't tell a lie. If we're all psychic, you're not going to get away with all of the stuff that a lot of the players up above are getting away with, So
100%. And that's what the fifth dimension, the 5D means. It's like, once we're all telepathic and telepathics, where we feel each other so deeply, you have to be authentic. And that's also why we're seeing so much darkness to the light. And I think 2025 is going to bring more of the darkness to light, and more of the players that have been behind that is going to shock people. And people are like, oh shit, that's what's been going on.
Absolutely. I think big disclosure energy is part of the theme. So
amazing.
Oh man. But man, this was
so fun.
Yeah, so much fun. I feel like there's obviously a million other things I could sit here and talk to you all day about, but I feel like I love that. A really great kind of place to leave it, where kind of where we're heading as a collective. And, I just want to say too, for anyone listening, it's there is so much fear in the world. And again, I know I probably sound like a broken record at this time, but it's really just so important to, be mindful of that and choose kind of the higher path, as kind of woo woo and whatever that sounds.
Yeah. And choose love. Get in your heart.
Yeah. Choose love. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thank you so much again, Kimber, for coming on.
So welcome.
Yeah. So many people will learn so much from that conversation, I think. So
I love that.